Hello, everyone. I'm George Rosca.
And I'm Mark Schneider.
And we want to welcome you to today's episode 70 of Say What, where we talk about the threats to our children in the public school system, including the harmful and all evil teachers union known as the National Education Association.
That's right, George. As many know, the NEA is the oldest and biggest union in the nation. First formed in 1857, it has 3 million members and counting. The American Federation of Teachers, another huge union, has a little over 800,000 members by comparison. But more importantly, George, the NEA is one of the most destructive organized influences on our children there is. But you don't have to take our word for it, because today we have a very special guest to describe this firsthand. Brenda Lebsack is a public school teacher in Orange County, California, and has been teaching since 1988. She was a school board member from 2016 to 2020. She and her husband have been in Christian ministry for over 30 years. They've got 2 grown kids, 1 grandchild, and 1 on the way. Brenda also writes for various publications as well as her own website, Brenda4Kids, the number 4kids.com. Brenda is also a very good friend to Protect Our Kids. Brenda, welcome to Say What? It's good to have you here.
Thank you, Mark and George.
So, Brenda, recently you published an article in the Daily Signal entitled Preferred Pronouns and More, What I Saw at Teachers Union Convention. This is probably a rhetorical question, but what led you to write this article?
Because I thought parents need a window view of what's going on and how radical the teachers union is. I attended virtually because, if you didn't have a vaccination card, you couldn't go in person, even though they were paid to go with all expenses paid, including transportation and hotel.
And this was in Chicago?
Yes, this was in Chicago. So those without the vaccination card could not attend in person. But I'm probably glad that I didn't, because anyone who doesn't have the same views as them is definitely demonized. And I'm afraid if I would have been there in person, it's just, it was like an arm of the Democratic Party, as far as they had 140 motions, as far as new business items, legislation amendments, and only 4 of those items were even dealing remotely with academics. The rest was basically the Democratic Party's platform.
We're going to talk about some of this now. You have been a teacher for an awful long time. How long have you been a member of the NEA?
Well, I've kind of gone in and out, because I was a public school teacher, then I was a private school teacher, then I moved to Nevada. So I would say, I don't know, probably about 20-ish years.
Long enough to have experience with them.
Yes.
So, Brenda, many parents don't want to believe that organized forces are actively corrupting our kids. But from your article, it seems like what we would call corruption, the NEA sees as virtuous, like their insistence on using delegates' preferred pronouns. And you saw this firsthand at the convention, right?
Absolutely. Of all the states represented, everybody, when they came to the microphone to speak, they said their names and they said their preferred pronouns, which was usually either he, she, they, and hex. Hex is one I'd never heard before, but and then one of the delegates made sure we knew that person had a uterus before she spoke to all of us. I felt that was very strange.
Say what? That is crazy.
It was a sight to be seen.
Brenda, tagging along on this question, because as a parent, and I got to meet you about a little over 4 years ago at a school board meeting, and I was one of those parents. I had no clue that this is exactly what was going on. And I remember that year that I went into, later on during that summer, because it's usually during the summer when the NEA has their annual conference, right?
It's always July 4th weekend, which I find very interesting, because most, teachers wouldn't want to take their July 4th weekend to go to a political frenzy like this.
So it
shows that the kind of teachers they're attracting are definitely the radical activists, which is spreading like gangrene.
So you mentioned how many motions they pass, and it's a very structured, organization. And that was one of the shocking things for me too in 2018 and 2019, looking through their business items. So you mentioned there was, over 100 business items, and yet just a handful were only dealing with education?
Only 4 out of the 140.
OMG. Wow.
Yeah. And those were just dealing with language acquisition for English learners and financial literacy. That was it. I found it interesting. I mean, we're talking about, nobody talked about the mask mandates when English speech acquisition, that's been affected because of the masks. It's hard to learn a language when your mouth is covered.
Can you tell us some of those new business items? Give parents a flavor of what do they do? Aren't they teachers? Aren't they supposed to be talking about how to be better teachers?
A lot of them dealt with civil rights, discrimination, identity politics. 40% of them had to do with protecting teachers' jobs, whether it be benefits or how to protect them so that they can become trainers of social activism with their students in their classes, because they found that to be a threat and that they are a social justice organization. And that was very much promoted.
All right. So parents, if you're listening, you heard something very important right now. The teachers union's not out there to teach your kids. They are a social justice organization. And Mark and I have spent quite a bit of time on different episodes on this podcast explaining what social justice is, how it's very different from biblical justice, and just the traditional definition of the word justice. So please be on the lookout, parents.
Brenda, how many people attend this conference every year?
I did not look at the numbers. This was my first time ever attending an NEA as a state delegate. So I would say, definitely thousands for sure.
So Mark, last time I checked, they usually have around 8,000 delegates from all across the country, because every single state gets, I don't know how many delegates, depending on how many local chapters they have.
Amazing. So this is a huge meeting, obviously, and I want to underscore again that the NEA is the largest union in the country by far, with well over 3 million members and counting. And Brenda, you also say the NEA's goal for public education is to be a training ground for political activism, and then it demonizes anyone who doesn't agree with them. You saw evidence of this at this meeting?
Absolutely. The executive director, Kim Anderson, gave a speech, very emotional speech, and definitely name called and shamed our Supreme Court justices and Republicans in general. She called them, racist, corrupt, cruel, exclusionary, homophobic, misogynist, discriminatory, radicalized, extreme. Kamala Harris also came and spoke, and she called Republicans in Washington, D.C. extremists many times over.
Incredible.
And just so you know, how I saw this firsthand is I did get an opportunity on the first 2 days to speak 3 times to different motions, which I gave a dissenting voice of opposition. And on the third day, the California Teachers Association, many of them, keep in mind, I'm watching this on my computer from home. So I see this angry mob come up to the microphone and tell the NEA leaders, the vice president, we need to remove one of the CTA delegates because they don't represent us. This person doesn't represent us. I knew they were talking about me because I was the only person giving a, dissenting voice. And the vice president quickly said no and then adjourned for lunch. But then after our NEA, I did write that article for Daily Signal to let people know that I do not think that public schools are a safe place for students. And afterwards, 3 days later, I got an email from the California Teachers Association Executive Board, including Toby Boyd, who's the president, saying that I was suspended as a union member from attending any more union conferences for the rest of the 2022 school year. The reason they said is because of a CTA conference I attended in April, which I handed out papers with QR codes to let teachers know what their union is really representing and how they're taking away parent rights, because most teachers don't really know that, and they are parents. Most teachers are parents, and they don't know that your union is actually taking away their right. So I handed these out, and they said it was unauthorized. So that's the reason they suspended me. But why would they suspend me for something I did in April, and then actually 3 days after I came out with this article about the NEA convention?
How very inclusive and tolerant of them.
Yeah, the timing does seem to be a bit suspicious, isn't it?
Definitely. And I actually appealed the suspension because I find it so hypocritical, because they say that they are against punitive suspension and that they want to replace suspensions for reparative practices and reparative justice, which is like having kumbaya circles, so that you have to analyze your implicit or explicit bias. And so I requested a reparative justice circle to see them in person and sit down with them so we could restore harm and gain understanding of and build relationships. But they refused my request.
But you're not vaccinated, so they don't want to be around you.
I'm very harmful. Yes.
Now, Brenda, you write in your article very interestingly that the teacher, I'm quoting now from your article, the teachers union is a lobbying arm of the Democratic Party. What led you to this conclusion?
Because all their motions and everything, their speeches it was the platform of the Democratic Party. It was broad brushing police as corrupt and biased. It was mocking the Second Amendment, saying it's a societal harm. It was all about identity politics to protect the marginalized, most of all, non-conforming gender identities and many sexual identities. That's what it was all about.
Incredible. So if there was sort of a main theme of this particular convention, could sort of summarize for our listeners what that theme was? What was most of the time spent talking about? Oh,
it was all about identities. I mean, we had Palestinian identities, Israeli, Black Lives Matter, Native Americans, different gender identities, different marginalized groups that felt they were being unheard, and how we need to give them a voice and teach students to have a voice in government. Also, definitely about increasing abortion rights and reproductive justice.
It's hard to respond to this. It's just, I mean, this is an education association that is supposed to encourage teachers to do a better job of ostensibly teaching the 3 R's, right? Reading, writing, and arithmetic. But what you're saying is this is a completely politicized organization that all it wants to do, it seems like, is pursue the woke agenda in our public school system.
Absolutely. And I find it odd that in order to attend, I had to agree not to record or to do anything like that. I'm thinking, this organization is educating our nation's children. Like, why is it so secretive? What are they trying to hide? This should be an open forum. This should be broadcast for all to see what's going on in the inside. Why is it treated like a secret society?
Brenda, you mentioned about their, disdain and hatred towards police. Have you seen anything during that conference mentioning that just in the first half of this year, in the public school system, there have been 181 staff members, this means principals, teachers, who have been charged with child sex crimes? Has the NEA been doing anything about this and raising up, a stink?
Oh, no. It's all about pointing the finger at other people. So the spotlight is off of them. They never try to look within to see if there could be a problem from within. If it is, it's all about implicit or explicit bias against people of color or against non-conforming genders or non-conforming sexual identities.
That's very interesting because...
It was interesting. I want to bring up because one of them was talking about increasing funding for mental health. And I brought up in my speech that, if we're going to increase money for mental health, then we need to look at the crisis lines that are already in our schools. The parents don't know that in these chat spaces, they're mixing adults with children to explore their genders and sexualities. These are unvetted, random strangers. And this could be absolutely a sticky web for sexual predators. I mentioned the Trevor Project and Trevor Space. As soon as I said the Trevor Project, Becky Pringle cut me off. And she said, "You're not speaking to the motion." I stopped and I said, Madam President, I would be happy to send you evidence of this and screenshots showing that our kids in all our schools nationwide are being put in harm's way of sexual predators with random adults internationally. And then she just stopped.
Wow.
Whew. Brenda, were you sort of the lone conservative voice as far as you could tell at this convention? Were there any like-minded people that spoke up against their obviously politicized agenda?
Yes, actually, I did have some teachers reach out to me after they heard me speak the first time, because there was a pretty large group from LA Unified of conservatives, because they have been, with this vaccine mandate, a lot of their jobs have been on the line. And so they were really fighting for there was a motion about mandating all, vaccines for teachers. And they were fighting hard against that. So there was a group of them there, and we got connected on the phone and on Zoom. But they, thankfully, that motion did not pass. And it did not pass by a pretty large margin. I think 84% opposed. So that was good.
Well, speaking of the LA Unified School District, obviously we've heard reports that Planned Parenthood is collaborating with LA Unified to put in clinics in many of the schools in that school district. Did you see organizations like Planned Parenthood, SECUS, and other pro-woke organizations in attendance or in partnership with the NEA at this conference?
I did not see that. I mean, there is they are partnering with outside agencies. And I believe these outside agencies can also, have input into the business items and into what is put into their legislation amendment. So, yes, there are partnering agencies that are working with the NEA, and these are special interest groups that pay money to be part of their organization.
And conversely, one concerning point that you made was the NEA's plans to smear organizations, any organization that is opposed to their agenda. Can you expand on that?
It reminded me of the Southern Poverty Law Center, how they have a hate map, and they try to use shame to coerce and manipulate people to do what they want them to do. So that's reminds me a lot of it. They want to create this smear campaign on any organizations that they say is taking down public education. So in my speech, I said, well, you should add NEA to that list, because you're demonizing over half the population of families that are conservative and that don't believe, according to the Pew Research, don't believe that gender is, they believe gender is based on biology, not that it's a choice and that there's infinite genders and pronouns to choose from, like the NEA endorses.
Now, obviously, you've received some blowback as a result of the article in the Daily Signal. And by the way, that's gone viral. Many other news agencies have picked that up. I heard some talk radio stations actually talking about the article. Any other blowback that you've received since you've gone public with exposing what happens at the NEA conference?
No, it's been kind of quiet over here. So we'll just see. I mean, I did attend in my school district. They had a safety town hall meeting for Santa Ana Unified School District because of the, Texas shooting, and to give parents a peace of mind with their kids coming back to school of what safety protocols will be in place when their kids come back. And I did attend that meeting, and I just said that, I am an adapted PE teacher. I go into 7 schools, different schools, and I complimented them on their safety protocols for shooters, but I said, listen, we are not addressing the crisis hotlines that are in our schools that parents have no idea about, that are putting their kids in harm's way of sexual predators with all of these random strangers to explore their genders. I brought that up and I have turned it into the police. The police was there. I've spoken to the district attorney, and I'm really hoping something happens with this, because Riverside County has already created an investigation with the case number, and this should not be ignored. It's a very serious matter.
Yeah, no kidding. So, Brenda, we're getting close to the close of our program, but I did want to ask you, based on your many decades of experience teaching kids in the public school system, your experience as a board member, and your experience with the NEA, if you had one message to deliver to parents of children in the public school system, what would it be?
Public schools have become a tsunami of indoctrination, and it's coming in from every angle. And we need school choice. We need alternatives, and we need educational reform. And if you want to really keep your kids safe, you need to look at alternatives besides public education.
Brenda, thank you so much for your advocacy and your courage in exposing the threats to our kids in the public school system. If listeners want to contact you, what is the best way to get a hold of you?
My website is www.brendaforkids.com, the number 4, brendaforkids.com. And there's a contact. They can just press contact. It'll go straight to my email. And my website can be accessed in all languages because there is a Google Translate feature at the top. So I hope it can be a resource for people.
Brenda, thank you again. Well, George, I think that's all the time we have for today.
That's all the time we have. And Brenda, I also personally wanted to thank you as well because, man, you've been a fighter, big-time fighter, true voice and advocate for parental rights and for children's rights. And so thank you for all the sacrifice that you've put in. Thank you for allowing yourself to be demonized and called names and all of that. But we know that your reward will be great in heaven. So for our listeners, once again, brendaforkids.com. Please go visit her website. And thank you very much, everyone, for tuning in. We'll see you next time.